Hey guys, it's Everseen here. So I've been playing HCSSF this league, and I started off in a Smithic Tava. He's like level 93, and then I ended up making a Blood Mage because I saw all this Rake and Bloodhunt stuff going on, and I thought, hey, it must be fun. So I tried it out, and this has been probably the best HCSSF run I've ever had in both this game as well as PoE1. This build is incredibly cheap, incredibly easy to get online. The clear, single target are both phenomenal. This is a powerhouse for actually like farming gear. So we're just going to get into it. This is going to be a build guide about the Rake+Bloodunt Blood Mage with Lightning Spear for clear. I've seen a lot of this on trade. I've seen a lot of videos, a lot of people using Crown of Eyes, the Spirit Shield, all this other stuff, but a lot of those aren't really viable for Hardcore, and I also want to say that this is one of the tankiest builds I've played in Hardcore, and we'll get into all the defenses and all that good stuff. But yeah, this is going to be my build guide and my take on the Rake+Bloodunt Blood Mage. So before we get started, I just want to start off by saying this is going to be an extremely long video. I'm sorry if you guys think I ramble too much or whatever. I don't like making super long videos because I know I don't want to waste people's time, but there is tons of tech to be discussed in this video. This build is inevitably going to get nuked, but there are still so many good intricacies of the build, the makeup of the build, the scaling of the build, that like it's just tied together so beautifully. Really, like, this is a really good build. It can just do everything in the game, and it can do it well. And so I want to make sure that everything's explained so that the knowledge from this video can actually be transferred into maybe making your own builds or applied to like another really good meta build sort of thing that comes up. But yeah, this is like one of the best hardcore builds I've ever played, so I really want to like be thorough with the information. So yeah. So I guess to start off, I've gotten to level 96. I have done a pretty good amount of pinnacles. I haven't done Delirium 4 yet. I probably should just do it soon. I haven't done any Arbiter. I personally really don't like the Arbiter fight. I think that it's very gimmicky, and I think that if you make one little mistake, you're losing hundreds of hours of playtime for a hardcore scenario. I think that the fact that the arena does actually more damage than the boss itself is a big negative for the game's health, and I think that they really need to address it. They had some boss fights like this in PoE1, like the Exarch fight, for example, but really, like, the boss was still threatening, and I just feel like Arbiter is like Exarch times 10, and I hate that fight from PoE1, so I just equally hate that fight in PoE2. So I haven't really done much Arbiter. I do plan to do it. I can probably one-shot him up to difficulty 3, I would think. I've been able to one-shot every other tier 4 pinnacle. Delirium doesn't have one, but yeah, Olroth, Xesht, as well as King of the Mist, I can farm at tier 4 comfortably and can one-shot, if not two-shot them. So the first thing you're probably wondering is, how do you level the build? So I've actually got a POB that I'm going to have linked in the description of this video, and it's going to go over all of the stuff that you need. So I have a bunch of skill trees here, and you can scroll through them with your mouse wheel. You can go into skills, and I have a bunch here you can scroll through, and then also items, and I've got like jewels and stuff that are a different setup as well. So let's just go over maybe like skills, for instance. Like, this is going to be your Rake plus Stomping Ground leveling. This is just traditional stuff. If you really haven't been watching around, there's quite a bit of other content creators making videos about this. It's pretty straightforward. Just stack as much strength as you can. Use Scavenge Plating with Splinter on your Rake because you'll break armor constantly, have tons of armor through the campaign. And yeah, you're pretty much doing this so that once you get to, you know, Cruel difficulty, you can swap into the Rake+Bloodunt setup, where you have enough skill points to actually get into crit and actually start kind of destroying the game. The only thing that you need to play this build is a Tangletongue. I would say 18% plus. I would say that you don't even really need a super high-end Tangletongue until like the real late game, when you actually start to like remove crit chance, for example, to accommodate more crit damage bonus kind of thing. So yeah, I've got a bunch of you know, leveling skills, and like when you swap basically to Lightning Spear from like so like Rake's Stomping Ground tree here, then I swap to Lightning Spear, picking up all these crit nodes so that we can start doing the Rake+Bloodunt. And then Act 3 to 6, where you're like grabbing all this stuff. And then I've just got like a little bit of intermittent intermediate mapping, and then my character, which is the level 96 Blood Mage. So my character is going to be the one that you probably want to reference the most, because yeah, it's pretty good. Now, another thing I want to mention too is that if you are trying to level this build and you just want to get into your main setup as possible, I would say that you need to have Sanguimancy and then Blood Barbs as a minimum. You need Blood Barbs as a minimum because the elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude, and we're using Infernal Cry to give us so much elemental damage, which essentially just converts to more bleed magnitude. I've trial and errored a lot of things as well. As far as like ascendancy skills, like the skill tree itself, and I've had a couple setups, and we'll talk about that really quick. So for my setup, basically I just swapped from I had this whole highway here with Subterfuge Mask, and then also First Approach. So First Approach is nice because it gave me that extra crit chance that I needed for enemies on full life. Since then, I have Anointed Subterfuge Mask, which is going to save me all of these points so that I can push up into Throat Seeker, which gives me a ton of crit damage bonus, and then also Preemptive Strike, because our Rake is essentially going to have 100% increased crit damage bonus against enemies on full life. And the reason why I took Preemptive Strike is because my Rake is actually kind of relying on... I forget what the gem level is named, Pinpoint Critical, so that it can have like almost 100% crit. So just let me get into the stats. So here you can see my crit chance is 100%. My effective crit chance is 98% because honestly I need a little bit more accuracy. If your hit chance is below 100%, your effective crit chance will be whatever your hit chance is, obviously, because yeah, you can't have higher crit chance than your chance to hit. So Rake, we have Pinpoint Critical. If we take this off, our crit chance goes to like 90. I really like having 100% crit chance. It just gives you so much better consistency in your damage. So whether or not you want to do that is up to you, but that's kind of how I've done it. I did have Heft, and no, I had Heavy Swing instead of Pinpoint Critical before, which gives you more melee physical damage. But I've been doing this because I think it works better. I've also got Bloodhunt with Innevitable Critical, which is inevitably going to give me a critical hit. This one scales quite nicely. I already have a 90-something% chance, but with this, it's 100%. And yeah, the configuration, we'll go over this in a second. But basically, I tried out on the Ascendancy skills, I tried out this. I was using Gore Spike for a while. It actually doesn't really give you that much crit damage bonus. It only gives you about 100% in PoB. I don't know why this doesn't calculate on tooltip in the game. It's kind of annoying because you can't really see the difference between having it and not having it. Obviously, I'm playing in hardcore, so I'm going for Crimson Power. This is giving me like 600 additional health because of my chest piece, so I opted to go for this instead at the cost of a little bit of damage. But with my skill tree workaround, it actually ended up being about the exact same damage, just a different setup where I have my points. Now, another big thing to mention, I've seen a lot of other builds screwing around with Blood Mage, and some of the guys in hardcore are doing this wrong, to my knowledge anyway. I don't know why I've seen so many people doing this, but they've had Herald of Thunder linked with Electrocute, Neural Overload, because this is obviously going to get that Electrocute proc a lot easier. And then Lightning Infusion, Long Shot. I'm doing Long Shot and Ambush. I think it's nice because it gets the extra crit, and then Long Shot gives you more damage. But I've seen a lot of people trying to use Elemental Focus. I'm not sure if they just want the extra elemental damage and don't care about inflicting elemental ailments. But this specifically tells you in-game that you cannot inflict Electrocute. So I don't know why you would have Electrocute and Neural Overload and this together. Makes no sense to me. Maybe somebody else knows in the comments, but I mean, it's pretty black and white to me, so I'm obviously not going to use this. I'm also using the Ambush because the Ambush, getting the guaranteed crit, basically makes it so that the Electrocute primes on like basically every single enemy, because you're Herald of Thunder, for example, like my crit damage bonus is 1000%. So yeah, you're getting like a really big Herald of Thunder on all these targets, and you're pretty much electrocuting rares as soon as you hit them, sort of thing, with a shock. And we all know Lightning Spear just has really high chance to shock, so it works really well. Okay, the next thing to talk about is Bloodhunt itself. I have opted for Bloodlust, which gives you more melee physical damage on bleeding enemies. I'm gonna just be honest here. I don't know if all of my links on Rake or Bloodhunt are, you know, 100% optimal. This is just kind of like what's working for me, and I've been trial and erroring a bunch of things. But yeah, I have Innevitable critical. I have Overextend because this gives us 30% more critical damage bonus. Like, keep in mind that more is multiplicative, so this is multiplying all of our crit damage bonuses by 30%, which is huge. And if it was 30% increased critical damage bonus, it wouldn't be very valuable, but since it's more, it's extremely valuable, and I think this is like a link that you cannot skip on Bloodhunt. And then also another one that you cannot skip is Impale. So Impale is really interesting with Bloodhunt. Something is going on weird with the game, though, where Bloodhunt is actually not inflicting an Impale on a boss. I've had many instances now where I've actually hit a boss with Bloodhunt, didn't kill it, but I don't have an Impale to then extract with your next Rake. So the way that ailments work in this game is that Rake is a bleeding skill which will inflict bleeding 100% of the time. But the way that ailments work in the game is it's based off the initial hit. So with Impale, when you go to extract that Impale, which if I'm hitting a Bloodhunt for like 20 million, and then I get an Impale on it, it's like, what, 30% of the damage, or I don't remember, but it's a portion of the damage is an Impale, right? So on my next Rake, some of the bleeds that I'm getting are absolutely disgusting, like almost as much as the Bloodhunt itself, but in bleed form, so it takes some time to actually bleed. But man, with the Impale, like when you hit a Rake over an Impale, after you've empowered with Infernal Cry and all that, it's mega damage, like absolutely giga damage. So yeah, those go hand in hand, Bloodhunt and Impale. This is a best in slot support gem in my opinion for it. And then I just threw on Concentrated Effect here because it just gives me more damage, and the only thing that it gives for a downside is like the explosion afterwards. Like I'm still hitting, like if I hit a rare in a map, I'll still hit the second rare next to it and kill both, sort of thing, so it's really not an issue. All right, so another thing that I want to talk about that's really important about the build, and you can play it however you want. You can play with a shield, you can play whatever, but I opted for a Scepter. So Scepters are really, really good for this because we get so much extra spirit to use. I pretty much use like 6 spirit gems in the build, but you can see here, the easiest way to get a Scepter like this is really just taking the hybrid spirit and mana roll, and then also a high tier spirit roll on 2 Omen Scepters, and just recomming them together until you eventually hit it. It's like a 20 to 25% chance to do it. It's really not hard to get at all, so just keep doing it until you get one that has like about 80% like this, and then you have like 282 spirit, and you have tons of spirit to actually use. Now, the other thing to mention with the Omen Scepter is that it gives us the skill Malice. So Malice is really good because it will inflict critical weakness on enemies. So we'll just go look at it real quick. Malice here, critical weakness, causes hits against affected targets to have 0.5% to critical hit chance. So I'm pretty sure this is base, but maybe not. But either way, it's just more crit hit chance. So this is going to make it so that we can pretty much crit guaranteed every time. But yeah, the duration is 4 seconds, but we inflict it 0.5 seconds, so you could say you get 8 stacks before they all expire. So you could say roughly you will get like 6 to 7 stacks always if you're like in the vicinity of the boss. So that's like an extra, you know, like 3% crit chance. So it's really good. So that's why I'm using an Omen Scepter, if anybody is wondering about that. Okay, so another important thing for Path of Building that I cannot show, and I just don't know if I'm doing it wrong or something, but if we look in the skills tab, I'm actually using Blasphemy and Temporal Chains, and for anybody that doesn't know, Blasphemy basically turns a curse into an aura around your character. So anything that gets in my presence will basically be cursed with Temporal Chains. And the reason why we're using Temporal Chains is because this actually makes the bleed duration longer. So the way that Temporal Chains works is it makes the enemy's debuffs actually expire slower, and bleed is considered a debuff, so that means that we'll actually get more damage by running Temporal Chains. You can run Enfeeble if you want, because Enfeeble is really good, like say for bosses, to take less damage, I did this very early on until I got like really good gear, and then I swapped to Temporal Chains, but this is really good. Another thing about using manual curse on this build is that with Blood Mage and a high level curse, you're looking at a lot of life and mana cost, so I just opted for Blasphemy. So that's why I'm also like running a Scepter, because it enables me to use this Blasphemy setup, which works really well for bleed. Another thing that's really important about having the Blasphemy and Temp Chains thing is I don't have to manually line up my curse on a boss, and as soon as I actually inflict a Rake on a boss, they will be cursed with Temp Chains already, which will then, in turn, with this Ascendancy point, for bleeding you inflict is aggravated on cursed targets. Every single time I do a Rake, it's going to be aggravated immediately, which is really, really important for your overall damage. So I guess I'm trying not to make this super long, but I should mention that with the Temp Chains thing, what I'm trying to say is that for some reason it doesn't calculate Temp Chains in the total damage. So I don't know how to do that. Maybe someone else does, but I don't know if it's because it has Blasphemy or whatever, but it's actually not counting as like a buff skill in here or whatever, curses and debuffs. Like it's showing Sniper's Mark, but it's not actually showing Temp Chains, so I don't know. But yeah. All right, so let's talk about the configuration tab. This is a lot of things, conditional things that you're going to want to put on the character. Basically, like, I'll explain all of them. Yeah, if you're new to PoB, like, this might be overwhelming, but I'll try and, like, show them all so you guys understand. So Rage, the reason why I have this at 22 Rage is because of Infernal Cry. Every time, because of the support gems, when we War Cry in the presence of a unique enemy counts as 20 power. So we will get 4 rage times 4. So it'll be 16 rage. And then we're using Second Wind so that we don't have to use Orb of Storms and like constantly spam Orb of Storms to get our rage up. You can if you want, I just don't want to because I'm lazy. So I use Second Wind, so that means that I can Infernal Cry twice. So what happens is my first Infernal Cry gives me 16 rage, and then what happens with Enraged War Cry is it will consume 10 of that rage to give me 30% more damage. So I will be left with 6 rage, we will Infernal Cry again, and then we'll go up to 22. And so ideally, our attack, if we're doing it right after our War Cry, we're going to have 22 rage. So that's why that number is like that. And then have you crit recently? Because obviously we're critting recently. You could actually take this off if you want, because maybe on a boss you're not critting recently because you're kind of not attacking. And then when you do your Rake, but I have this on because I count it for the Bloodhunt. You might not count it for the Rake. Like you can see the Rake damage goes down quite significantly. If you're using the Orb of Storms setup, if you use Brutality on Orb of Storms, you won't do any damage to the boss and you will actually crit. So therefore it will give you this bonus to your damage. So basically what's happening is that Orb of Storms is an elemental skill. And if you put Brutality on it, it means that it does no elemental damage. So therefore you don't do any damage, but it will still hit the target. And you're getting that increased damage if you've dealt a critical hit recently. So we're getting a total of 70% increased damage here, which is why you can use that on bosses before you do the setup that I kind of do. The Orb of Storms definitely gives you more overall damage, but I just don't really like using it. But anyway, so I've got Shocked Enemy in the last 3 seconds. Basically, when you Rake, you're going to get 30% effective shock, and you're going to shock instantly. So I just have this on because this gives us quite a bit of damage. Now, the reason why we're getting 30% effective shock is because we actually kind of double dip with some increased effective ailments and stuff on the tree. So I believe, yeah, magnitude of damaging ailments. No, well, it's not a damaging ailment. I'm not exactly sure where it's coming from, but I'm getting... Maybe it is classified as a damaging ailment. I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, I just know when I look at the boss, it has 30% shock. So that's what we're going with. So I put, is the enemy shocked? Yes, and I put 30 effective shock in here. We'll just try and go in order here. So Concoct, I'm using both Concoct and Ambrosia on Rake because I want it to consume my life and mana flask so that I can get more damage. So with the life flask, I'm basically consuming 23 charges, which is about 69% bleed magnitude, which is absolutely insane for damage. So we have 29 flash charges there. And then we also have number of seconds since Innevitable crit. Basically, it's going to be for Bloodhunt, where if you see if I put this to 0, it will be 90.99 crit chance. But if I don't attack with Bloodhunt for about 3 seconds, I will then get, or 2 seconds, I will then get 100% crit chance. Now, I can probably take that out later once I screw with a bunch of things, but effectively the whole build is just managing your crit chance and your crit multiplier and making sure that you just have consistent damage. So put that back up to 4. Warcry power 20. This doesn't really do anything. Wind Dancer stacks, I just do that to see my effective HP. It goes up a bit because we're getting more evasion. Now, for distance to enemy, I've opted for 3 meters as a comfortable distance. This is going to take into account when you're using momentum. So momentum is going to give us a lot more damage. So as you can see, when we're using 30, because every 10 is a meter, we're getting roughly like 30% more damage, right? So that's kind of what that's symbolizing. And then bleed aggravated, yes. And then enemy on full life, yes, but all the time, no. But like when they're on full life, we're doing this full life because of the preemptive strike node, which says 100% increased critical damage against enemies that are on full life. So that's why I have that tick. And then the low life portion, that's for the deepest tower setup, and we'll get into that after. Is the enemy cursed? Yes. So this is just like, I just put it there just because it's there. Is the enemy bleeding? Yes. And then crit weakness stacks, I put 10. You can put 6. I thought 10 was like a moderate amount because on a boss, I've roughly noticed that I can keep up to like 10 if I stay in the vicinity. And yeah, that's about it for the configuration. All of the quest rewards, 30% increased charms, 25% increased stun threshold, 15% increased life recovery from flasks, and then 10% chaos resistance is what I went for. All right, so let's go into game, and I want to actually show you where all the damage is coming from. So the reason why Blood Mage is so disgustingly good is because of this one node here, Blood Barbs. So bleeding you inflict on cursed targets is aggravated, which every time we're going to be inflicting bleed, it's going to be on a cursed target, unless you're lightning spearing like across the map. But for a Rake, we're always going to have aggravate, which is already huge because aggravated bleed is just way more damage than a regular bleed. And then elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude. Now, why this is so crazy is because there are so many sources of elemental damage, especially on like rings, like lightning damage to attacks. We could get like lightning, fire, and cold, and it would all contribute to bleeding magnitude, which is kind of insane. This pretty much reminds me of like Original Sin in PoE1, where like you can convert all this elemental damage to chaos damage. Yeah, so elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude. So where are we getting most of our bleed damage / elemental damage? And a lot of it's coming from Infernal Cry. So Infernal Cry, when we Warcry next to a boss, we're getting 150% damage as extra bleed damage, essentially. Another thing that we're doing too, like we're using Innervate on our clears so that we're getting more damage as lightning damage, which is just more bleed damage for lightning spear as we're clearing. Another example too is like Concoct. Sorry, not Concoct, Ambrosia. So supported skills consume 20% of your maximum mana flask charges on use. So both of my flasks have 116 charges. So I'm consuming about 23. So 23 times this 3% would be 69% of damage as extra lightning damage. So that's absolutely massive for, you know, bleed damage. I'm also getting this little node here for Essence of the Storm. Gain 5% of damage as extra lightning damage. Pretty damn good. You could put in Against the Darkness here if you really wanted to. I don't think I really care that much. But yeah, you could like get, maybe these two nodes would stretch to it. And you can get damage as extra elemental damage. But yeah, that's basically all that we're getting for extra damage. But it's enough on top of all of the bleed stuff where it just gets a little bit insane. Like, you know, obviously we have more magnitude of bleeding, 75% more. And then we have Concoct here, which is giving us 69% more magnitude of bleeding. So you're basically getting 2 deep cut gems with Rake on top of all this elemental damage, which is just, it's basically just flat bleed damage. But like, I guess it's percentage elemental damage, so it's really not flat, but you know what I mean. It's giving you an upfront bulk of damage, which then you're converting into bleed damage essentially. So yeah, basically the whole single target rotation is you just Infernal Cry twice on a boss, and then you get back from the boss about 3 meters, and then you do a Rake, which will then, you know, give you the momentum buffs, the Rake buffs, 130% more damage based on the distance traveled. So, you know, we're getting so much damage from this Rake, and then you're letting that bleed tick. It's going to be aggravated. There's going to be tons of elemental damage on that bleed, and then you're going to hit with a Bloodhunt, and then hopefully it's going to inflict Impale, and then all you need to do is just wait. You can get, like, wait for your Infernal Cry to get one more Infernal Cry. Use Infernal Cry once. You don't even need to use it twice, and then do another Rake on that Impale, and the damage is just going to be ridiculous. So that's pretty much the whole single target thing. For clear, the whole idea with the clear is you're using Electrocute as almost like a defensive layer on this build. So obviously, like, I'll just go over Lightning Spear first. Lightning Spear is just ridiculous. We're getting Frenzy charges from Cast on Crit Sniper's Mark now. I did have Combat Frenzy before, and you are going to want to use Combat Frenzy in the early game. But for Lightning Spear now, I'm just using Volt, which is extremely good. I'm using Fork. Volt is just going to give us way more projectiles. Fork is going to give us way more projectiles. I'm using Innervate. Now, you could put Innervate on Herald of Thunder instead. I just have it on Lightning Spear. And then I have Lacerate because we want it to inflict bleed because we're getting so much extra damage as bleed damage. And then Primal Armament just to give me that little bit better boost of elemental damage. And now the biggest thing of all is the Herald of Thunder. I actually just 6-linked this because it's worth it now, especially with all the buffs to getting socket currencies. I'm dropping Perfect Jewelers pretty regularly. So I opted for Electrocute and then Neural Overload. So these two together is really good, especially like as soon as you start really scaling your damage, you're going to be electrocuting rares, you're going to be electrocuting basically every mob, and an electrocuted mob just doesn't do anything. It doesn't attack, it's basically stunned, and when you put Neural Overload with it, it just helps it electrocute a lot easier. And then a Lightning Infusion, just more lightning damage is going to make your electrocution a lot easier to proc. I'm using Long Shot because we're off-screening a lot of things with Herald of Thunder too, so we're getting that much more damage. And then Ambush is just to give us way more damage, because most of the time, once it starts to cascade out, once you get to like way out here, you're getting the Long Shot damage as well as that Ambush, because everything's going to be on full health, so you're just going to do a shitload of damage, honestly. So for Spirit Gems on the build, I'm using Wind Dancer. This one's really good, especially with Blind. Maim and Calling Strike are just kind of there, but Blind is the biggest part, because once you're hit, you will actually hit the enemy with Wind Dancer, and then will blind them, which will make their consecutive attack just miss you. So it's really good. Blind is really good, especially for an evasion-based build like myself, so that's what I'm using there. Blasphemy, we already went over this with Temp Chain's Heightened Curse, Magnified Effect, so that it has a bigger radius. I'm using Herald of Thunder, we went over, and then I'm using Ghost Dance with Fast Forward, which just means we get Ghost Shrouds a lot easier. Currently, what I'm sitting at, like with this qualityed up, it's 7% of my evasion, and if I get hit on 12.5k evasion, it's roughly, I don't know exactly, I'd have to calculate it, but it's like 500 to 700 energy shield. Whenever I'm actually hit with a Ghost Shroud, and we have 5, so that's pretty good recovery already right there. And then I have Cast on Critical. I still have it level 14. It's just going to stay there because of the inner requirements. And then I have Sniper's Mark, and then Impetus, and Energy Retention. This is like the package. And then I just put a 5th slot on this to get Inspiration, which just makes the cost so much better, right? Like Sniper's Mark is 79 mana, 97 life. And now it's 55 mana and 68 life, so it just makes it better. The more health and energy shield that I can have, the more tanky I feel. So alrighty, so now time to talk about the most broken part of the whole entire build. I think Blood Mage is absolutely ridiculous right now. I think it's super strong. I don't know how bad it needs to be nerfed or whatever, but it is insanely strong. It's above every other class, in my opinion, in the game right now. You don't have to play Rake Bloodhunt, whatever, like cool one-shot build, but you could just play Blood Mage as an Ascendancy because of Life Remnants. So Life Remnants is extremely OP because now we don't have Grim Feast, and they both do the exact same thing, except the Grim Feast was for Energy Shield, and now Life Remnants is for life. So we still get that overflow, which I overflow to about 6,500 health while mapping. I don't really dip below 5,000 health while I'm mapping, because I am just constantly getting these life remnants. So the way that it works is that you have a 25% chance, well, yeah, if we could quality it, it would be 35, but it's 25% chance to spawn a remnant on killing an enemy. Most packs in the end game are going to be 20, maybe 30 enemies, so each one of those has a 1/4 chance to spawn a remnant, and then spawn a remnant on critically hitting a target, so we effectively have double the chance, just because of critical hit being 100%, that we're going to, yeah, get remnants like crazy. So these remnants, you have basically magnetism, so you can collect them from further away. This gives you increased effect, but they vanish after 3 seconds. That's fine though, I don't mind that. With these two in conjunction with each other, you basically just grab them all before they expire anyway. And then I have precision on it, that's irrelevant. But I have interlude on it as well. Effect of remnants generated by supported skills occur 3 seconds after being collected. So this gives us basically just constant recovery. In the early game, when you don't have good gear, I would actually take this off so that you're getting the health instantly, because as you can see, life recovered per remnant is 555 life each time we pick one up. And if we're picking up 10 in a pack, that's insta full life, like overflow life immediately, right? So that's why it's like really fucking broken actually. And like this gives us 658 because we get more increased effect. And then yeah, you're just like, it's affecting you 3 seconds after. And the way that the ascendancy works with, like, you take hits but you take them over 4 seconds, like 25% is over 4 seconds instead, they both really like outweigh each other and complement each other, so that you're like constantly having this really good recovery and mitigation at the exact same time. So life remnants, extremely good. Like, I was really surprised at how broken this actually is. I don't know if that's just because of the whole like 100% crit meta with Tangletongue and whatever, and like if you're not critting as much, maybe it doesn't feel as nice. But yeah, even on bosses too, like if you just hit crits, like you could just spam lightning spears on a boss if you wanted to try and get like overflow, for example, and stuff like that. So yeah, really good skill, like absolutely insane. We're getting tons of recovery. I basically never even like see my health dip below the actual like 3283 that I have. I'm basically always overflowed, and I'm always constantly getting remnants that are refilling my health. So it's like probably the best recovery in the game at the moment. Right, so we went over a lot of offensive capabilities of the build, but I want to go over why this is like my #1 hardcore pick right now, and why this build is just absolutely tanky. We talked about the life remnants obviously being strong, especially, you know, once you hit level 90 and it gets to level 20, because it's an ascendancy skill, you're just getting tons and tons of recovery from this one skill alone, which is just going to keep your life topped up all the time. But we also have a cushion of energy shield, which works really good for the build, because we have ghost dance, so we're getting about a quarter of our energy shield every time we're gonna get hit. We don't get hit very often either, because we have 81% evasion with 12.5k evasion. I'm getting tons of evasion from Wind Dancer as well, and then we also blind enemies from Wind Dancer if we do get hit, so the chances of getting hit consecutively twice is pretty low. And if we do, we have Ghost Dance to sort of just give us some instant recovery on top of, you know, all the life recovery we're getting. So like, say if we get like stunned and we can't do anything, Ghost Dance is going to sort of give us that safety net, as well as Wind Dancer, because when we get stunned, it's going to trigger, which is going to blind enemies. So it's just really good for defensive layers. Another thing too is like the Electrocute with Neural Overload for Herald of Thunder is actually in itself an offensive / defensive layer. Electrocute is extremely OP for mapping scenarios with this build because of Lightning Spear. You're able to pretty much perma-freeze. I say freeze, but it's Electrocute. They basically can't do any actions, so all the breach mobs, you can pretty much like instantly electrocute them. So nothing is really an issue while you're mapping. The only issue is like detonate deads or big slams from bosses or whatever have you. The rest of it is pretty damn manageable. Volatile Plants is pretty scary. Even though I have 75 chaos res, you still don't want to tank something like that because they're ridiculously overtuned. But yeah, so Lightning Spear with, you know, using the Electrocute as a defensive layer is a big part of why this is also tanky. But yeah, you know, obviously we're not getting hit a whole lot, and then when we do, we have instant recovery sort of thing. So the build is extremely tanky. We have, you know, obviously a big portion of our energy shield because we are using an energy shield helmet. So, you know, this one's pretty crazy. I have other energy shield helmets. You could opt for not going for life on it, and you could just go for straight up energy shield instead, kind of like this helmet, where you have 470 energy shield. Now, the cool thing about getting so much energy shield from our helmet is that we obviously have a lot of energy shield, but we're also using Subterfuge Mask, which is giving us a shitload of evasion just off of that. So we're getting 840 something evasion, basically almost as much as the body armor from the helmet, just because of this one node on the passive tree. This is probably like the best node on the passive tree. I don't think I would play an evasion build without this node. I think it's just really strong. This was an ascendancy node in PoE1, which can just give you a gauge on just how powerful it really is, because it was locked behind an ascendancy in PoE1. All right, so let's talk about what I've been trying to find for gear, how to gear, what stats you're looking for in all your pieces of gear for this build. Basically for, you know, like you want like energy shield helmet, but you want life on like every single piece of gear. So I've opted to go for sort of a hybrid playstyle of like getting high energy shield, evasion, and life. So I've recommed life and percentage max life on my amulet. I have life on my chest, life on my helmet. I have life on my gloves, my boots, on my belt, right? So it's giving me this huge life, because when you get life on this build, you're effectively getting double the life because of the overflow, right? So the more life you have, the better your overflow is going to be effective. So another thing that I don't have life on are my rings. Like, rings are very hard to get in HCSSF. So the biggest thing that I'm hunting for as an endgame project for rings is I'm trying to fracture like a high tier lightning damage, and then I'm going to chaos spam for like either a high tier life roll or like a high tier flat cold or fire damage roll. The more flat damage that we have, the more it's going to contribute to that bleeding magnitude, right? But like, obviously I'm going for lightning damage to attacks, because that's just going to buff our lightning spear as well, which is going to like significantly help our clear, right? So like my tooltip's 10.7k, could be a lot better, but that's what it is for now. And yeah, so you just like, I would say rings, you really want that lightning damage to attacks, and then whatever other stats you need. If you need like chaos res is kind of what I went for, so that's basically on my rings. And then these boots I ended up getting chaos res on, so yeah, use 2 amethyst rings if you really need to, sort of thing. But I would like recom like lightning damage to attacks with chaos res, or lightning damage to attacks with life. You don't even need a super high tier life. You could just do like 70 life and then have like a decent chance. I just ended up putting these gloves on recently. They have really good lightning damage to attacks, and the life is basically the 2 stats that I'm hunting for when I'm trying to recom, because, you know, they're the most important stats for the item. Just the flat lightning is just going to give us so much bleeding magnitude, so you just want that, definitely. Then we have, obviously, the holy grail of the build, a Tangletongue. So I have many Tangletongues. These are super easy to get. Lots of people have made videos on how to get these. I've just been chance orbing them like crazy, sort of thing. I ended up landing a 19.92. I ended up corrupting it, getting a fire damage implicit, and then I'm using a lightning damage one here. This is a good weapon. I am unsure whether or not I want to use it over this one. This one gives me less crit chance, but it's also giving me a double crit damage bonus soul core potential, and having 2 of these in this weapon is giving you base critical damage bonus, which then all of the increases are going to scale off this. Basically, the difference between these 2 Tangletongues is this one gives me 200% more critical multi, and this one gives me less, but like more overall damage, like for clear and stuff like that. So I'm kind of just using this one. So yeah, get like a 19% plus, corrupt them, try and get, you know, even 20 plus would be cool, but getting the 2 sockets on anything like 19.5% crit chance plus, I think is like best in slot. And then you just shove the crit damage bonus soul cores in them. And then yeah, for body armor, it's, yeah, you're just going like defense, life, helmet, defense, and life. We went over the amulet. Belt is just like life, tons of resists, as much resist as you can. Movement speed and life on boots is what I recom for, and then like exalt the rest kind of thing. But yeah, that's about it. And then I'm using a talisman for a 10% increased magnitude of bleeding you inflict, just because this gives me more overall damage. Alrighty, so jewels are extremely important for this build. I did a ton of Trials of Secumas to get some really disgusting jewels. This one here, the main, not this one, but the main stat that you're looking for on jewels is increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict with critical hits, or just regular increased magnitude, or crit damage bonus with spears, crit damage bonus with attack damage. So you have a ton of avenues. You can also do increased duration of damaging ailments. Another stat that's really good is damaging ailments deal damage faster. That basically makes it so that your bleed just like does more damage quicker. So that's a really good stat to go for too. This one I could upgrade, but basically all my jewels are like focusing on 2 stats. So I just ended up getting 2 decent stats. So, you know, I have a max roll with the 20% increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict with critical hits. And then I have the maximum roll for duration. So duration is just nice, gives you more overall bleed damage. For this one, I've got crit damage bonus for attack damage, and then increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict with critical hits. So that's really good as well. And basically, yeah, I could get better ones, but it's kind of hard to get. Yeah, I just would need like 3 stats instead of 2. Basically, all my jewels are just 2 stat jewels. So increased crit damage bonus with spears, increased magnitude of ailments you inflict. Really good. They're both like, I'm pretty much only hunting for like max roll jewels sort of thing. This one's really good. I got 19% crit damage bonus, 14% magnitude of ailments you inflict, and then gain additional stun threshold equal to 7% of maximum energy shield. So this is actually giving me like 150 stun threshold or something like that. So that's really nice. Stun threshold you want kind of as much as you possibly can, just because you just won't get stunned as often. I am using a stun charm on this build though, just because it's much easier. Yeah, it's just good to not be stunned. Alrighty, so we'll jump back over to POB, and I'm just going to show you the deepest tower setup. So the deepest tower is really, really good for this build, and I think when I'm going to use it is when I do end up eventually attempting like Arbiter 3 and 4 sort of thing, because it just gives so much more damage. But this is sort of what I'm looking at to like run deepest tower, and it also, I just want to say that it's way squishier than my normal setup. So I don't really want to use it overall because I'm in hardcore and I don't want to die and I lose like half of my evasion rating, and I prefer having the setup I have now. But yeah, I'm already one-shotting like T4 pinnacles, but this is going to like put it over the edge where like you're going to get insane damage. So this is probably the best way I could see doing this build with like a Scepter. Obviously you can use like the Sacred Flame, which is really good for the build sort of thing, but this is just like what I can reasonably do in SSF, so that's sort of like my mentality behind all this stuff. But yeah, so I am going for, I'm dropping a lot of stuff. I dropped like this whole cluster here, I dropped Throat Seeker, and I took all this like lucky damage and then damage on low life, and then I also ended up dropping a From Nothing diamond from King of the Mist for Unwavering Stance. So that's giving me, you know, this Finality node, which is 120% increased damage. Basically for 1 jewel slot, 1 node, I'm getting 120% increased damage, which is absolutely insane. So we obviously want to take that. And yeah, you can see the damage numbers. So like, I'll just go, maybe I'll just do Rake. But if we have the deepest tower set up, I'll show Bloodhunt instead. It's not really, it doesn't really show the way it should in POB either. Yeah, I don't know. It's very weird using POB. It's just to roughly get a gauge on whether or not your damage is increasing or decreasing. I wouldn't religiously use it, not in its current state anyway. I just think it's still kind of wishy-washy. But yeah, so for the deepest tower, obviously we have to wear that helmet. That takes away our helmet slot. We lose Subterfuge Mask. Then we're using the From Nothing. And then, yeah, if we just take Bloodhunt here, for example, we have 295,000 hit DPS. And keep in mind, too, it's also a lucky hit, so it's going to give us, like, a lot more damage just based off the lucky hit. But if I swap back to level 96 Blood Mage And then if I swap my tree to level 96 Blood Mage, it literally halves our damage from the hit DPS. So that's why I'm sort of thinking about doing this setup. I think it would be really, really good for Pinnacles because, you know, obviously Pinnacles, we just don't really need to worry about survivability as much, especially when we're kind of like one-shotting bosses. So I'm just like sort of flipping through so you can see like the differences in damage sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty good. I would say that it's just a little bit too squishy for my liking. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for today's video build guide on the Blood Mage. I know I tend to ramble and and off quite a bit. I know this was quite a long watch. If you did make it this far, thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry if it's a little bit hectic, but hopefully the timestamps help you find what you need. And yeah, give this build a try. It's really fun. I really think that all you need is a Tangletongue, and then you can basically beat the entire game. It's a really cool SSF fresh start, and you never know what you might find for another build while playing this build. But anyways, guys, yeah, if you could like the video, that'd be great. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.